Oh, awo. Yes, I. Shalom. Testify Tuesday for this. We're in the part 2 right here. We went off about 15 minutes before the hour, but we're gathered together once again on the air in the Irid, in the spirit of the King of Kings in Christ, our Black Lord and Savior Yeshua HaMoshiach. Eyes is eye to the King of Kings in Christ, and grace, peace, and the love of Kedamawi Haile Selassie, Adonai Jah, RasTafari, be to all the I and I and I and I. Yes, at the top, let's just get into this because that was a very good clip right there that was played from. Some of y'all might have the calls were dropped, so them might have missed the latter portion of it, but hopefully can check it out. It's been copied in the archives and everything like that. But there was a clip that was played on from Baltimore, where the ruler of this land, the president, was speaking, and it was just so kind of interesting. I was saying behind the scenes, I was like, wow, we need a laugh track. You kind of need a laugh track and everything. If you really understand the word games and the little cunning craftiness that's really going on. You hear them talk a lot about, we got to protect property. We got to protect property, and police are there to protect property. If you don't know anything about, the way that it used to so-called be, at least in theory and in some places in practice, it was actually life, liberty, happiness, property, safety, respect, and privacy. And I was looking through this little booklet right here, and this is one of the things I think we need to have and need to really study, and in studying Torah and studying God law, it makes I and I really be able to really understand certain spiritual principles of law, where a lot of these kind of documents that, we basically, people say, well, the Constitution ain't going to save us. I never said the Constitution will save us. You see what I'm saying? But then a lot of ones did not recognize why His Majesty kind of did what He did, even with the League of Nations. You see, when it says that He wages war, like in righteousness, there's a particular law of this land. And when you look at the Constitution and some of these documents, and you really kind of take a lot of the historical and other kind of stuff, at least what we have been taught about history and the race and the racism, which is kind of it's such a dangerous deception, because what happens is a lie, but that lie causes real pain, and even when people learn it's a lie, some of the real pain and the wounds still exist because of that lie, even though the lie was never the truth anyway. But when you look at the document, I'm looking at the Citizens Rule Book, right? This pocket-sized booklet. If I could put a copy of this in each of them's hands, and if even your youths or children and relatives could have a copy of it, it's just very important to at least understand, what is it that is the so-called law of the land. And after the Obama clip and the tune that was playing, I was going to start out and with a word sound of the King, of I and I, Abba Father, of Kedamawi Haile Selassie, of the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, where he says, throughout history, it has been in action. Slika, Indegna, again. Throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most, that has made it possible for evil to triumph. Some might know of the statement from Edmund Burke. I think an Englishman, philosopher, but he had a pretty interesting statement that kind of rings to the same spiritual truth or the same truth, and that is the statement that goes, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Yet the King of Kings really, as we say, he really breaks it down when he says throughout history. So when we study history, and even, if you please, her story, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most that has made it possible for evil to triumph. Somebody tell those lost sheeple, stop talking about no justice, no peace. You see, because you are going to the creature, right, instead of going within and turning to the Creator. You already see, the more you say no justice, no peace, the less, whatever little bit of so-called justice and so-called peace that there was kind of evaporates. But this Citizens Rule Book, I think, is a very, very important document for us to have, as important as, of course, after the scriptures, but much of it is based on what we call, or what is called, common law. Now, not to get into a whole big dissertation on it, but common law basically comes out of the black Hebrews and the Ethiopian Hebrews, and the influence of the righteous, right, Israelites in Europe that brought the scriptures and the Bible, and from that came many articles and statutes of common law, So when we look in some of the histories of Europe, so forth and so on, and we study it, we can really see this is where the Bible talks about after the Jews, the black Israel, only a portion, but most rejected the Moshiach, Yeshua, that he turned to the Gentiles, right? Both to the so-called black and the white Gentiles that would receive it. So the Bible and the scriptures went to Europe. And then from all of that came what we know today, or what is known in legal parlance, in legal phraseology, as so-called common law. Now, some of our brothers and that a lot of this was more, like all this was more, like the Moors. Yes, the Moors were there, but the Moors was a latter terminology for the Ethiopians, right, and the Ethiopian Hebrews. And basically there's two kinds of Hebrews, like there was Ishmael and there was Isaac. So we have the Moors, which go more along the line of Ishmael, and thus even with Islam, and which is their interpretation much different and much more correct than this other Arabian sort of thing that we see going on out there, presently. But that's a whole other matter. But the other lineage of the children, the seed of Abraham's influence in Europe, and we're speaking about that black nobility, what's called the black nobility, so forth, the real the black Hebrew nobility, is like two branches of it, right? We would say the upper branch was the Ethiopian branch, or the Hebrew branch, and manifested through Judeo-Christianity, where we can find a lot of ancient black peoples who were either so-called Jewish or Hebrew, or who were Christian, even in early Rome and the Catholic Church before the rise of the Vatican. A lot of people don't recognize how the Vatican rose up, and basically it was a coup. It was a hostile takeover of an institution that originally was Judeo-Christian. This is why you'll hear them sometimes say, yeah, a lot of early saints were black. And when we say they were black and African, doesn't mean that they all were righteous, even Augustine and so forth and so on. But there was that black influence. We're just talking about just throughout history. So be it, right? So anyway, from that common law came a lot of laws that we hear about. Because if you read the Constitution and all of that, and this shows you the cowardice of the devils and the liars, that we know that at the very same time that they were writing these wonderful things and very true things, really not writing them. They were rewriting them. You know what I mean? Because much of this came out of even the whole structure of the American government was out of the Iroquois Confederation. You know, the natives, the native peoples, the black peoples that were already over here had a structure of government that when the Europeans and the Pilgrims came over, basically what they did was learn from it, adopt it, and when they got it right, they turned around and persecuted and killed off. And this is just history. You know what I mean? This is just history, and the chickens are coming home to roost. So I'm looking at this document which contains the Constitution. Let me just point out what this contains in it. It's jury duty. It's the laws of the land, jury rights, the 10 Commandments. Well, it breaks down like the Communist Manifesto, the differences with these sort of things, but it breaks down the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. When you read through it, these are some very high and noble sentiments. In fact, and this is how I know that these people stole it from somebody else, because they never have been able to live up to it. Have you noticed that? You know, they never really have, even among themselves. You know what I mean? Even when we talk about man to man, if we talk about the white man to the black man was unjust, that's true. That's historically proven. But also we can see to his own people, he was exploiting his own people. In fact, the good proof of it is the term slave, come from Slav. You know what I mean? When certain Europeans were oppressing other Europeans, and these were called the Slavs. So then they basically superimposed this sort of name on the lost sheep of the house of Israel, you know, which were brought over here, and on other peoples, other Israelites and other Hebrew peoples who are already, or so-called black people who are already over here in this region. So I just want to point out this Citizens Rule book, and we had ordered a couple of copies of this. I think Jones, you know, or Bill Hicks, whatever. But, you know, the documentation is what is, and in fact, this is like a nice, tight, small little book. You can have a pocket-sized book. You can have it on you. And it will come into effect because we cannot ignore, you understand, certain laws. Not because man, see, these laws were before the so-called white man. You know what I'm saying? It's basically like he has said, of these laws, and other people said, okay, you know what I mean, and they're right, you know, or out of ignorance, not knowing, they gave up their particular right. I found something very interesting when I was listening to some of the Baltimore, the mayor, the BT 1000 mayor speaking, and when I heard Obama just now, or at the end of the previous broadcast speaking, I was thinking laugh track should be superimposed, because what he was saying, if you really understand the so-called law that he so-called was sworn uphold, right? I noticed that they were saying, we're going to protect property. Property. They kept saying property, right? And you remember the whole thing about God, our Creator, gives each unalienable rights, and those rights are life, liberty, happiness, property, safety, respect, privacy. Now, this is how perfect, in a sense, the words of this document are. And what the King of Kings, Father, says, he says, no matter how good, say the words of agreement or covenant or something is, if the will to keep it, to protect it, to enforce it is lacking, it could be the best written words. They're basically meaningless. And this is what is basically happening, that even those at the bottom of the back of the dollar, Nouveau Ordo, Anuta, Coeptus, whatever, Seclorum pyramid, even the oppressed and the down-pressed people are beginning to recognize, the folly of this, even if they don't understand and comprehend all of the technical details. But we have inalienable and unalienable or natural rights. When Ainai's RasTafari and many of the elders used to be saying, Ainai's a natural man. Ainai's a natural man. A lot of people thought that was speaking just we eat natural food, we live natural liberty. No, it's that on that level, but it also means there's a meaning of that in terms of law. In fact, on certain documentation, when I was going from the old status slave name, somebody else's name, you see, when you have that slave name, somebody else's name, basically you're committing fraud before the law. You know what I mean? So when we carry around, we as so-called African peoples or Ethiopian or Hebrew peoples carrying around European name, that's a fraud before the law, and they don't have to respect that even under this law. So you can be talking about, well, this law says such and such, but you are really carrying a fraudulent title, a fraudulent name. So you really have to understand certain things about that, and much of the Moorish teaching of law, I would really recommend one to learn the principles of law, especially, brother, I think, is it Tariq Bey, Tariq Bey? I really like how he really, some of the Moors are promoting the respect, but some of them are really teaching that, some legal principles that even people who go to Harvard and Yale don't even learn or get to know. But our natural rights mean our God-given rights. Yet we would think that we have natural rights, but we have submitted ignorantly, not knowing, to unnatural, an unnatural and artificial status before so-called law. So on a certain level, the ignorance, as it says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Hosea 4:6. Yes, Isaiah 10:1-2 says, woe to those who decree unjust statutes and to those who continually record unjust decisions to deprive the needy of justice and to rob the poor of my people of their rights. This is Isaiah 10:1. Hear what is supposed to be part of the so-called rights of, people in this land. Natural rights are those rights such as life, and that is life from conception, life from the point being conceived. In fact, it's interesting when you look at the back of the dollar, it says annuit coeptis. They say announcing the birth of. It's really announcing the conception of the nouveau ordo seclorum, a new order of the secular world. Now, people say the new world order is coming, it's coming. No, see, that's the trick. That's the head fake. That's the psych. The conception of it was 1776. I think the baby would have been born sooner or later. Really, the baby is going into adolescence or going into, it's going into his bar mitzvah. Maybe 9/11 was that baby's bar mitzvah, but the New World Order already was conceived in 1776. But the point here is, what are our natural rights? Right? Our natural rights go beyond just the I'm not going to say the carnal, but the fleshy level, like what we eat and so forth and so on, and how we live and whether we keep ourselves natural or whether we go artificial. That's a level. That's a very important level. That's maybe a first level. You know what I mean? Because first we go from the natural to the spiritual, on that level. But there's also natural rights pertaining to law and of us in our present status. And this is especially to Ethiopia, Black Israel, or, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, in America, an artificial state. We were in an artificial state of law ever since, basically, the 1960s. In fact, the people before the black people before the 1960s had a better understanding of this Constitution to defend black people before 1960s, right? And we can see the Black Wall Streets, and they were Wall Streets, but they were black communities. Not just in America. We can look at Pinnacle, you understand, Ivo Howell and Gangungaroo Mara in Jamaica. who founded actually one of the first Ethiopian World Federation communities in Jamaica and one of the most successful RasTafari communities, and they did the same thing they did with, Rosewood and with, the Black Wall Streets. Some of the videos are out there. But my point is that even though the evildoers did their evil, the people had a better understanding of their standing as per se this law. After 1960s, when we got sold on this civil rights shit, you know what I'm talking about. When we got sold on that, when we began to call ourselves these things like Black American and African American, you don't really understand that we lost a lot of the gains that our elders and ancestors knew even when they were themselves Negro. And I know this is kind of hard for one, but even Marcus Garvey organization, United Negro Improvement Association, but not the United Ethiopian. See, Malaku Bayan, Earth Day, this day, April 29th is, he came forward with that imperial authority, with the kingly authority, you know what I mean? And he established and fully fulfilled that identity that we knew even when we was calling ourselves Negroes back in the 20s and 30s. If you look at a dictionary, Webster's and other dictionaries from that time, Ethiopian meant Negro and Negro meant Ethiopian. You won't find that so much now because they recognize, that we understood that and we were using that and we were making amazing progress, understand, with that particular sort of knowledge. But once again, back to forward to this. Natural rights are those rights such as life from conception, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Which is like freedom of religion or spirituality, freedom of speech, freedom of learning, freedom of travel, freedom of self-defense. Hence, laws and statutes which violate natural rights. In other words, God-given, biblically referential rights, though they have the color of law, because the Levitical priests, their colors was blue and white. The blue, the fringes, that's why the police also use the blue too. And blue in the Ethiopic language refers to heaven. The color blue is called Samayawi. Samai is sky, is heaven. So you can just make those connections right there. So they may have the color of law, are not law, but they are imposters, but they are fraud and fraudulent. The U.S. Constitution was written to protect these natural rights from being tampered with by legislators. Furthermore, it says our forefathers, but really some of our forefathers was involved as well. We'll touch on that as well. That's why when the British was trying to spank the disobedient children, the American so-called forefathers, they told the blacks, listen, if you fight on our side, we will grant your freedom. And we'll, so your what you call will be called the Ethiopian Regiment. Notice that during the so-called War of Independence, rebellion, whatever they want to call it, the British were recognizing our people as Ethiopian and promising them their full freedom for joining their side. So for joining their side, they restored to them that knowledge and activity of their sovereignty and called them Ethiopian. And many Ethiopians, many of the so-called slaves joined that. And George Washington, at the last minute, had to say, though he didn't want no niggers in his army, he had to see what the British were doing. And he did the same thing, and he said, if we don't have them in our army, the blacks and, the Negroes, we won't win this. You see what I'm saying? So we understand why they did what they did. But furthermore, the forefathers who wisely knew that the U.S. Constitution would be utterly worthless to restrain government legislators. You know, like Obama and these Democrats and the Republicans and whoever these people are would, you know, these are the legislators, unless it was clearly understood that the people had the right to compel, that means to force, the government to keep within the constitutional limits. Now, one of the first violations, even in this Baltimore thing, but if we go so-called back historically, or even recently, we can find that they've been doing this in city to city, wherever they've been having these situations, that they always say, we're going to protect what? Do they say we're going to protect life and liberty and pursuit of happiness, or they speak about property? But there's something very interesting about the order. Because look at this. Listen to this. You first have to have life, right, in order to have liberty. You see what I'm saying? In other words, the first step is life from conception. Liberty means freeness, freedom, freeness, right? So life, liberty leads to happiness. So life plus freeness or freedom, free up the I self, you know, be natural, overstaying your natural God-given rights, that is what leads to happiness, right? And then with life, liberty, and happiness, what's the next step? It's property. So see, people got this all mixed up. They're pursuing property, but yet, you know, they barely have life, right? They really have no liberty, and John knows they ain't happy. You know, they think property will get them happiness, but that's backward thinking. So life, right, plus liberty and freeness, right, that means unenslavedness, leads to happiness. So people say, why are these people so unhappy? Your Constitution explains to you why. You know, life, liberty leads to happiness. That leads to property. But now Babylon is playing this game, right? Because Babylon says we're going to start at property. And then property, safety, respect, and privacy. So we know this that way. They're about the property because they already think they have life, liberty, and happiness, because to them when they get property, materiality is their life, is their liberty, and that is their happiness because they are materially minded, carnally minded. But what they look for next is safety. How are we going to have safety? That's what they talk about, order, you know, public safety and order. And we don't want the people who we stole it from to be getting upset and getting ideas about taking back what we stole, which is really theirs by right because they stole it from them. So property, safety is what leads to their sense of respect, right? A false sense of respect, you know, to look up to them. You know, they're our so-called elected officials. But it's like after you elect them, they become gods. How is that? And then privacy. See, their privacy is not like what we think our privacy is. See, they say, oh, they're invading our privacy to see what we're doing in our houses and to have all this spyware and software on the technology. Yes, they're doing that. But for them, their privacy is to keep their little conspiracy private. They don't want you to know the tricks that they're really doing. That's what private, how much they have stolen from I, that is their privacy. So I was reading a portion of this. I want to share this in light of this situation right here. And once again, the Citizens Rule Book. I think we had a PDF of it. Perhaps it was uploaded to RasTafari Groundation. But if one-to-ones, maybe we'll work this out behind the scenes and, you know, in the different FEMA regions we are in. And let's put it out there. You know what I'm saying? Because we have to look at the context. We can't, you know, look at it like we want it to be. If we have a vision of what we want it to be, we have to first of all start out with what it is. So first from what it is, then we can work, plan, pray to get it to where we want it to be. Right? Original documents. And I thought this was interesting. In light of what's going on right here. This is the general index to the unanimous declaration. First of all, they said to dissolve certain political relationships. Because Obama is trying to say that the people do not have a right, you know, to rebellion against tyranny. That's written into the human rights preamble. which came much later on, 1948, I think. But it's also written into the Constitution. It's actually based on the Scripture and the Bible. You understand? Because really, it's the law that's written in your heart. He said he'll write the law in our heart. You know when, you're being down pressed at some point, you're going to have to rise up or you're going to be totally stomped down. So when they decided to break relations with England and all of that, yada, 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 they came together and set these points up, right? They said they needed to. The first point was a need to dissolve certain political relationships. This is why in our Declaration of Sovereignty based on the indigenous rights of the people, and brothers and sisters, there are so many native peoples around the world that have been using the same, you could say, human rights and natural law to actually win back, their stolen heritages. They don't want to tell us about this. Even many of the Native Americans here in America. You see what I'm saying? And what they're really seeking to do is to get this to some new order, some chaotic situation, so that even though they have lost their false claims on America and so many other places around the world, you know what the Revelation says, the prophecy says that everybody will have to return to their own vine and fig tree, to their own land, to their own, Jah has set the bounds of land, not based on how many guns, ammunition, and how many people you can kill and murder and mayhem. You know what I mean? But many of the native peoples in America, like the so-called Indians, and many of those Israelitish, some are Israelitish, some are not, but many of the Native American peoples have been winning on the, we could say, the international level, and following in ironically the footsteps of what the King of Kings said in his final ultimatum, the 1963 speech, part of it which Burhana Selassie, Bob Marley, did as the war song. So in other words, what the King of Kings said there was supposed to be acted on. What hadn't happened for almost 30 years was it being acted on. What those who His Majesty had beat and he kind of bought us time for us to get up, stand up. But Babylon threw a whole bunch of confusion and misleaders and everything else. So instead of us moving forward in prosecuting our case locally, regionally, federally, internationally, we got caught up in this civil rights and we affirmative action, and now they got to, give us a quota even if we don't deserve it. They have to give it to us because that was a whole mind game. That was a whole psychological thing so that George Bush, after 30 or so years, he could stand up on Ethiopian New Year, 9/11, and he could proclaim what? It's not about one small country. What small country are you talking about? It's like these Nephilim, so-called Zalmuna Islamic ones and ones, and we know, and my fathers Jews, all of them. It's just a massive enemies against the Lamb, against the King of Kings, isn't it? Just like the word said it would be. But let's move on. In our declaration of sovereignty, based on our studies of these things, the first thing we had to do was to dissolve certain political relationships. If you're a black person, they say, well, you're black, you must be a Democrat. And if you're black and you're Republican, they call you a coon. You're a coon, you're cooning. You know what I mean? You're a bedwench, you're a coon, right? But the first thing we need to dissolve is certain political relationships. So we have the Jesse Jackson, the Al Sharpton, the unelected black leaders. Ain't that something? These guys be telling us all the time to vote for our leaders so that we can get representation. But whenever something happens, they're always the first ones out there speaking for us. And even sometimes we be like, oh, that's so good that Al Sharpton was there and he got to speak and say something, or that Jesse Jackson. I even said that a couple of times until, the Holy Spirit had to wake me up and say, wait. These guys are always telling us to go out there and vote. They say even vote or die. Wow. You serious? Vote or die, and yet we never even vote for them. And they can get up there and say whatever they want to say, even if we say, no, the crowd, we as the people, this is our voice. So if you're going to speak for us, then say this. But they get up there and say whatever they say, so forth and so on. So we have to, first of all, dissolve certain political relationships. And the mass majority of the lost black sheep of the house of Israel, so-called black people in the Americas, they still have a deep political relationship with the Dixiecrats. Oh, did I say Dixiecrat? I'm a Democrat. Same ones. The Democrats and Dixiecrats. They were the old Southern Dirty South plantation owners. But anyway, secondarily, need to assume powers which God entitles man. So the second thing they did to rebel against tyranny. You see, so where Obama's a lawyer, knows this, but he's playing his role. Pharaoh, if you look at Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh be one moment he's like, yeah, he's down with the people. He's like, yes, I understand. Pray God for me too, and all this kind of stuff. And then the next moment, he's two-faced it. Pharaoh is like two-faced it. But anyway, after dissolving the political relationships, especially these political relationships that ain't doing us any good and haven't been doing us any good for the past 40 years, right? We need to assume the powers which Jah entitles man. So you understand, in this declaration, in this document, they were looking in the Bible into the glory of His Majesty for the powers, right, which God gives to all natural man, right, natural man, right. Thirdly, declaring separation from an unjust government. This is what the people can do, declare separation from an unjust government, because the government derives its powers from the people. But if you were to listen to the news, you'll think that these are the gods who just descended from Mount Olympus, for real, in a spaceship, right? But declare our separation from an unjust government. No justice, no peace, so we even mess with government no more, right? Fourthly, they say there are some self-evident truths. Some self-evident truths. That means some obvious truths need to be elaborated on. First of all, that all men, they say, are created equal. Now, I know some would say, and I've gone there too, that, well, look what they were doing with black people. I mean, how could they say this? Well, because the rich land-owning, enslaving white gentry, they were white peoples, but even, here's how dirty it was. They were a set of white people moving in this demonic deception called white supremacy that made other poor white trash people, that's what they called them, feel good by comparison to black people, so that ones would not see the humanity of it until it's too late. Like nowadays, you watch some of these ones on the YouTubes, and it's good that ones are beginning to see, past that. Even some of the militia groups out there are beginning to see that it wasn't so-called niggers or black people that were your enemy. It was the devil, and y'all were just the last fool. Devil. We already got fooled by him. That's why they fell too. But there are some self-evident truths elaborated. All men are created equal, like His Majesty says too. They're all one, basically naked. Everything else is an add-on, right? Right? B, God, our Creator, gives to each unalienable or inalienable rights, which are basically, to boil it down to simpler terms, natural rights. That, namely, life, liberty, in the sense of freedom, freeness, happiness, property, safety, respect or honor, and privacy, etc. And then you can continue to expound on that. See, the purpose of government is to protect the weak from the strong. Check that out there. The purpose of government, right, is to protect the weak from the strong. D, right and duty to abolish bad government. Now notice what was going on. These were a group of people who were under government. Just like these are a group of people who are under government. They're saying that, you know what, they tell us a lot of nice things. They got a lot everything's written in their law and all that stuff, and they pass new laws and stuff, but still they don't keep nothing that they pass. And how well it sounds, they still doing whatever they continue to do. You know, after their carnal, demonic, possessed nature, these rulers and the rich men of the earth, you know, nothing wrong with riches, but these who are part of this satanic cabal, whether they be black or white. Because doesn't Nyabingi tell I deaf to black and white down presses? In fact, it puts black down presses before white down presses. Because if the whites were really down pressing us, we really have to get rid of the black down presses in order to get at so-called white down presses. But maybe that's why things continue to go on as they do. But the right and duty, notice what it says, not the right to abolish bad government, but it's a right and a duty. In other words, if we have a right and duty to abolish bad government and we're so cowardly and so afraid and, oh, what they're going to do to us, they might hurt us and such, they're going to hurt us eventually anyway. You know what I mean? But, you know, according to their timing. But if one is so cowardly to exercise the right and duty, then what happens to them is justifiable even by heaven. There's a right and a duty to abolish bad government. One, fact. Revolution, as they call it, the American Revolution, was not out of rebellion by the colonies, they say. But rather, England rebelled against God's laws. Now, notice how these, like some other teachers, they be saying Peckerwoods and these white boys, because that's what they were. Though they wasn't all white people. Some white people were indentured servants that was, you know, they thought they was going to just work for 7 or 12 years. And sometime the white man broke his agreement to his own so-called white brethren, because once that money, that love of money got in him, he was even evil to his own white brethren. But his own white brethren thought he was a little better. Deception against the Negroes. You know, he's like, well, at least I'm not black. You know, well, sooner or later the noose is going to hang all. Anyway, the revolution was not out of rebellion by the colonies, but rather, they say, it was England that rebelled against God's law by repeated injuries of usurpation and tyranny. The young colonies were forced to defend themselves against England's tyranny. Isn't this how America began? Right? I pledge allegiance to the flag, for which is, I pledge allegiance to the republic, to the flag and the republic, whatever. The republic, democracy, republic. But notice the revolution, they say, was not an act of rebellion. Can we say that many of these riots that seem like revolutionary or so-called rebellious, right, was not so much just out of a rebellion, but rather it's because America, Amaruka, the plumed serpent. That was the original name of America, even before Amerigo. That's what they call it, the natives over there, Amaruka, which meant the plumed or the winged, the flying serpent. How interesting, right? That America has rebelled against God's law by repeated injuries of usurpation and tyranny, or just repeated injuries on black and poor people. You understand? Period. You know, the young colonies, you know, the youth, the young colonies, the youth, right, were forced to defend themselves against America's tyranny. Bad laws, you know, we're describing what is America's tyranny. What was England's tyrannies, right, in order to set the system up. Because, you know, that's what Obama was talking about. We should be law-abiding, and that's not this, and that's not the next thing. Yay. Yada, yada. All right, well, let's look in the documents themselves, right? England's tyranny was what? It's like America's tyranny, right? It was bad laws, bad courts, police state. What? They had a police state back then. Well, police state is coming. No, it's always when tyranny is police soldiers. And when I saw this in parentheses, I was like, swarm of soldiers. I said, that's like locusts. We've been thinking about the locusts is over there. The locusts is these soldiers coming out. You know, you see the helicopters. The helicopters look just like locusts, too, if you know what a locust looks like. You know, and the little helicopters look like little flying insects and stuff like that, little stinging insects. But England's tyranny, like America's present tyranny, with bad laws, bad courts, police states, sworn soldiers, taxes, will deprived of trial by jury, a jury of your peers. You see, at least people from your neighborhood or from that respective neighborhood, at least, deprived of trial by jury, because now they have a lot of trials are by judge. But you have a right, you can demand a trial by jury. Our brother, the brother N.J. Weedman, he actually successfully litigated, based on these very same things. You know what I mean? So it's important for us to know this, because here's just a test of what we are going to have to do even over there. Because this is a global situation. The earth is God's and the fullness thereof. If we can beat Babylon here, we will beat Babylon everywhere. Deporting, wow, ain't something they were deporting people for trial. Isn't this like when they take people and put them, in the prison industrial complex, right, in these state prisons, or even worse yet, when they, rendition, they, black sites, or black, that's what they call it, black sites. England declared of their protection. Have they, in an undeclared way, said that the poor people, the so-called ghetto people, the black people and other poor people, because they don't got no money, you know what I mean? They're not part of the Illuminati, you know what I mean? Therefore, they're outside of the protection of law. They just need to shut up and take it. England, like America, declared the colonies, or the ghettos, right, the ghettos, out of their protection. Rights of individuals plundered. And this is what we see in the most recent case made public of police state brutality. B, the colonies repeatedly petitioned England, but only received repeated injury. When I read this first, I was like, oh, wow. We can say that the ghetto repeatedly petitioned America, right? The ghetto repeatedly petitioned America and the American government, but only received repeated injury. Is this what's been happening? Protest after protest. You understand? And more of this happening, and even more and more outrageously evil. England was warned from time to time. Hasn't America also been warned from time to time? Lastly, it says right here, England was deaf to the voice of justice. Is America losing her hearing? Are leaders losing their hearing? It reminds me of that word where it says that they go astray as soon as they're born, speaking lies, and it's about like a snake, like a deaf adder that would not hear the voice of the charmers. People try to sing it in song. They try to do something on YouTube. They try to make it happy, happy, joy, and still that doesn't, it's like Christ. It's like, who I like in this generation to, it's like children in the marketplace. They sing happy songs and the people don't cheer up. They sing sad songs and the people don't feel sorry. It's like, do they have any soul? Right? England was deaf to the voice of justice, as it seems as though American, and the local governments, the state governments, also the plantation state governments, are also deaf to the voice of justice. So the colonies, according to this document here, they appeal to Jah, or God, as they would say, the supreme judge of the world. The colonies' right to be free and independent. Because in a sense, what was happening with England and the founding so-called colonies from their perspective is the same thing that is happening right now. There is no difference, only that the politicians and those liars who are elected officials, for whatever reason, maybe somebody has a gun to their head, who knows, an invisible Illuminati gun to their head. But, when I heard Obama told here to protect property, about life. What about the liberty, the life and the liberty and the happiness? What about that? you know, but the property, right? Didn't, in the American Revolution, the Boston Tea Party, as that mythology, probably some truth to it, but they make it all fancy and all these movies and all this la, la, la. But anyway, they tell us the basic story is that they dressed up like Indians, right? They dressed up like Indians. So basically they went in disguise identity theft. They went around like they were somebody else, right? And they snuck on board the ships, right? The so-called ships and everything, and they threw the tea overboard. Wasn't that vandalism? I'm sure they probably stole some tea. They probably put some in their pocket, too. They probably took some of that, too. Took some of that back. You know, who knows? They probably threw some off and kept some. They broke up some. It's like they looted. They went on board the ships, the English ships or whatever, and they looted. Right? But we're told that that's how this wonderful nation where we have freedom and rights, that's how it started out and everything. And well, what about now? The ghetto's right to be free and independent. What about that? You know, what about the people? I'm talking about the people, in other words. You understand? Under the protection of God, they pledge their lives, their fortunes, and honor. I think that's the real big difference. Right here, because a lot of people say, "Oh, let's leave religion out of it." I saw some protests where there was like some woman was like, "Oh, let's leave. We don't want to deal with religion. Leave God out of it." And I can understand what she's saying because you know a lot of these ones have brought the false God or the whitewash God or the pseudo God, you know what I mean, or the God of their particular religious denomination. You know what I'm saying? You know, not the true God into it. But it's interesting to see that when they founded this so-called erstwhile great nation, the same principles that they employed can still be employed because these principles are actually far older, you know, than the birth of this particular nation. They would like to let you believe that this is the first time. No, what they had the benefit of others who went before them, and, you know, they had the benefit of the Library of Alexandria. You know, they had the benefit of the Library of Timbuktu. They had the benefit of even the so-called black slaves or the enslaved Ethiopian Hebrews. There was a lot of tribes that were brought over here, but then enslaved peoples that were brought over here, many of the ones who were brought over here could read. See, they don't tell you that. A lot of the people who were first brought over here in the hulls of the slave ships, they could read and they could write. You see what I'm saying? It was only afterward, you know, that they, you know, enforced their tyranny over the newly enslaved, because once the black people could once again read and write, right? Once they could read the Bible, when a black man read the Bible, we had a Nat Turner. He didn't go to no religious seminary. He didn't have to, you know, get like indoctrinated to get taught how to be a pastor. No, he read the Bible and he got the spirit in him, and he did what he did. And when other black people were able to read such things like the Constitution and recognize, they were able, remember this is before a lot of these other things was put into the 13th and 14th Amendment. The 13th and 14th Amendment, those amendments, a lot of those things are not even ratified. You know, this is what they try to tell us, that now we as so-called black people, and I see so-called black people because the term black, we understand what we mean in the cultural sense and on that level. But on the legal sense, the term black and white are statuses. Right? And it's interesting when you study that before the 60s, so-called black people did use the term Negro, but the term Negro to the black person who was in their right or righteous mind was a link to Ethiopian according to the documentation and the evidence available then. So this is why they've constantly changed, like, dictionaries and so forth and so on. You know, they constantly change the point of reference. It's like we're playing basketball, and I recognize that, man, you can hit a free throw from that far. So what I do, I move the basket further away. I keep moving it. I even hide it after a while. You're ready to throw a free throw. Where's the basket? So you got to throw it. Your time is running out. This is the type of games that they play. So I wanted to bring this into the mix as well, because there's a couple of key things here, Leviticus 25:10, where it says, inscribed on the Liberty Bell, of America, is actually the words of Scripture that pertain to us in this prophetic time, 2015, this blood moon season, this Shemitah year. See, Israel will be free. Ethiopia, Black Israel will be free one way or another. Babylon can avoid it and ignore it. It's going to happen. And if they don't do it the righteous way, the right way, then even a lot of these people that they have oppressed and driven to this point will be instruments of the divine judgment. Because Leviticus 25:10 says, proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all the inhabitants thereof. So when they put this on their Liberty Bell, you see what I'm saying? They put it on it to kind of, I guess, maybe some of them believe. I don't know exactly what their point was, unless I look at their evidence or writing. But once they did that, they brought themselves into judgment. You know what I mean? George Washington said something interesting back of this. He said that government is not reason. The founding so-called father and slave, well, he wasn't a slave master. He was an enslaver. He thought he was a master of the Negro. You understand? He said that government is not reason. People say, we want to reason with the government. And you got to know what the law is, what square is, and you got to, rightly divide the word. You know what I mean? Government is not reason. It is not eloquence. I heard some of these preachers and pastors invoking MLK. And if an eye for an eye, we all be blind. No, that's not what it means right there, So, okay, so they take out our eye and we just walk around and there's not even a fine, right? Really? But George Washington said that government is not reason. It is not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. When you understand, you really need to meditate that government is not reason. It is not eloquence. Force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Second Chronicles, this is a word of, even though, before the gavel, and the gavel probably will be the earthquake, who knows, but before he hits the gavel, you understand, there's still time. It says, if my people which are called by my name, all of those so-called Christians too, you know what I mean? That's his name, at least according to their understanding, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. And that's 2 Chronicles 7:14. But if you don't want to, they're going to hear from heaven. They're going to hear, You remember the old thing from Flip Wilson, even though he was into this transgender, the dressing up in drag. Some of you might remember Flip Wilson. But he had this little skit in his show. I remember growing up, I used to watch the Flip Wilson show. The part where it says, here come the judge, here come the judge, like when they be hollering about Nibiru and the heavenly signs. All we need to be saying is, here come the judge. Acts 5:29 says, we must obey God. We must obey Jah rather than men. And I will just seal this up right here with saying, to give I and I the teaching of His Majesty, because, we don't want no devil's philosophy. We've gotten a lot of it, and that's all the politics. Get a copy of this, my brothers and sisters, the Citizens Rule Book, and may we continue to come out of the confusion, the Babylonian confusion of mind. Also come out of these U.S. cities. Some homework for the eye them. If the eye can find this video on the YouTube, it's on the Pastor Dowell website. I think it's Baltimore Riots, America is Hell, or America in Hell. It's very interesting because the Psalms say that all nations that forget God are turned into hell. You know, so, you know, when others talk about, like, you know, people talk about hell is somewhere like by and by, and whatever, yo, this hell is right here. The Bible even backs that up when it says that all nations that forget God, right, are turned into hell. And that's the hellish situation that's happening right now. But the word to the wise and to I is to come out of these U.S. cities. And I'm not advocating come out in haste, because if you come out in haste and stress, you're not coming out in grace and in truth. You know what I mean? First come out of Babylon, the confusion in your head and your heart, so you'll be able to hear his small, still voice and be guided by the Isla Irid. You know, wisdom and guidance, my brothers and sisters. Jah guide and Jah protect. Come out of the U.S. cities. Now, those who are able to do so now, like if you're able to do so right now, like some ones might have a light footprint. Some of us might have a heavier footprint. So it's almost like when some of us make certain moves, it's almost like, you know, I'm laughing because in a sense it's almost like that. If the African governments could be so helpful, it's like when the Nazis came over here, when their boys came over here, they moved all of their, you know, experiments and all of their books and all of their, they had tractor trailer, what the train car worth of supplies. So some of us are moving, you know, a camp in a sense, but some might be a little bit light-footed. You know, you don't have a lot of responsibility on that particular level. So those who are able to do so now, do now. Those of us who are able to do later, do later. Just hope and pray that whenever I do it, it is before it is too late in whatever region, you know, or area, FEMA region you might be, if and when a collapse should come. Although I don't think that they want to cause it to come, you know, the way that they are they're seeking to keep people like in a kind of a fear, you know, in a kind of a fear state, in a kind of a fear mode. But remember what Bob said in Burning and Looting in the lyric, in the relic. He said, this morning I woke up in a curfew. It could be, you know, you never know. Depends on what vicinity, what area we're in, what's shitty, because prophecy is that all the cities of the earth, all the cities will fall. You know what I mean? Because all the cities are just like every other city, all plugged into that Babylonian pattern. They're all after the pattern of Babylon. So all the cities will fall. When these big cities over here, like New York and these other cities, even Baltimore and these other cities fall, it's going to be basically a global fall, and it's going to be chaos in the city. So those of us who can come out, even as the advanced teams, you know, the advanced brethren and sister, and those who are able to do so now, do so now. Those of us who may have to do so later, you know, may we be able to stand before the Son of Man and do so later. And those who already are in the land, those of the them who already might be in the land, like some of the them who are here, and you know, you have nature for the expression of your God-given and natural rights, as you are able in grace and in truth and with a free will. Prepare a place for others accordingly, brothers and sisters, according to your free will and your means, but don't feel as though you're under any occupation, because Jah has, you know, Jah people. But be upright and let's be prepared, because Yeshua HaMashiach warned us of days like these, that the disciples are warned of the coming conflicts. And this is reason why he spoke so urgently when he said that in that day and that time. When he first sent them out, told them, don't carry purse, don't carry script, you know, don't carry sword or anything. Just go out there and preach, because he wanted them to be in the spirit, to get the irid of it, not to have to lean on, you know, like have your Bible there, but what do you recall? Testify based on what you recall. Free up yourself, as I would say. But then at the fulfillment, when they were about to graduate, he said to them, take your purse, take your script, you know what I'm saying? And if you don't have a sword, you know what I mean, sell your garments and buy swords. I think that'll be more necessary, ideally, for the land, if you understand what I mean, than for these shitties, because they have these draconian laws. So whatever you do, brothers and sisters, be wise. A little bit more on that particular word, but I'm going to pause for the cause, and we're going to listen to a little bit of the second tune that, once again, thank you, Wyndham Zawadi, for getting this tune already prepared. It's Burhana Selassie, Bob Marley's Midnight Ravers. And perhaps I can, we can come into a discussion of what you had brought up, very, very important reasoning, and we can find out what thus saith Jah Rastafari, teaching of His Majesty to I and I on that particular point. But here too, can't tell the woman from the men because they're all dressed in the same pollution. Did Bob Marley see that from such a time? It's like he just, when you listen to this tune, it's like he just wrote this tune today because we have the first gay president, first half-breed gay president. Anyway,
shalom again. Give thanks, brothers and sisters. That was the words of Burhana Selassie. Give thanks, Wyndham Yadin, for the blessed word. I took down many notes. I mentioned a lot of scripture there in reference to what's been happening. And brothers and sisters, we're about 45 minutes or so in this particular segment, and we seek to push forward, and hopefully we'll have another hour after that. We have a blessed cast of brothers and sisters that are gathered, and hopefully we can get to ones that are gathered tonight to be part of the discussion. And so, and I really, truly give thanks. I know we're in the late part of the early, really, part of the day here, in the middle of the strong here on a Tuesday. Hopefully ones can stay with us. But the Baltimore story is developing and still going through many themes within this particular, all this ruckus that's been going on. And we're still not done. There's still quite a few other topics that we'd like to go forward. So let's see if we can push forward. What we'll do, brothers and sisters, let's just get to these and some of the other headlines that we want to discuss tonight. And hopefully we can get to some of our brothers and sisters that are gathered, and hopefully we'll be able to join the discussion. So let's push forward with the remainder of some of our headlines for the strong, and let's take a listen, and perhaps we can open up the lines and get some discussion going on. So into the headlines.
Meanwhile, ISIL terrorists have released a video showing purported executions in Libya of some 30 Ethiopian Christians. The 29-minute video shows a group of at least 16 men beheaded and another group of 12 shot dead. A text on the screen identifies the men as followers of the cross from the enemy Ethiopian church. The 12 men, dressed in orange jumpsuits, are led on the beach before lying on the ground and beheaded with a knife. Meanwhile, in a desert area, 16 men dressed in black suits are shot at close range. ISIL has already released several similar videos showing the execution of its captives from different countries, including the United States, Britain, and Japan. Last February, the terrorists beheaded 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians in Libya.
The death toll is rising in Nepal after a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the region. Hundreds of people are dead, and fear is growing that more powerful tremors could strike at any moment. Let's get the very latest from CNN's Ravi Agrawal on the phone from Calcutta, India. Ravi, where was the epicenter?
Well, the epicenter was about 50 miles northwest of Kathmandu, which is the capital of Nepal. It was a 7.8 earthquake, which I should tell you is, the strongest earthquake that Nepal has felt since the 1930s. So, and in that earthquake in 1934, it is said that some 10,000 people were killed. What we know right now is that in today's quake, which happened many hours ago now, we already know that at least 700 plus people have been killed. Many more are expected to have been killed. Then that death toll is likely going to rise, we've been told by Nepal's Home Ministry.
I know that you're in Calcutta. You're not that great a distance away from the epicenter. Were you personally able to feel the tremors? And if so, what did that feel like?
Yes, I was able to feel the tremors here in Calcutta. They were quite intense. Speaking to Calcuttans around me when it happened, most of them had never felt tremors like that in their lives. This part of India, which is very close to Nepal, doesn't often face earthquakes. So many people here, it was a new experience to them. And I was actually in a cafe on Calcutta's Park Street, sort of the Fifth Avenue of this city. And people rushed out of the cafes and restaurants that were lining the street, worried that their buildings were shaking. Of course, what happened here in Calcutta, nothing compared to the scenes that we're seeing out of Kathmandu, and of course closer to the epicenter, where we know, even now, many people are trapped in the rubble.
Yes, I give thanks. There was a little bit more on the a few more headlines that I want to go through, but having a little bit of problem with the audio here. But yes, we have Baltimore going on, and we know this is where are we? Let's see. Let's take a check. Where are we? Right, blood moon season, Shemitah year. We have a few more cycles, a few more moons till another Adi Samet, and then into the other blood moon, which should be a lot more pronounced. We have the situation going on in Baltimore, which stems, well, not stems, but is related to the issues happening out here in New York City, in Missouri, in Chicago, and so these things it's evident that with the things that are happening, they're directly affecting a certain people. And of course, we have the headline of the Ethiopians being beheaded, the beheadings that happened, and some information about that as well, because going through it, get some, also, the same when you hear certain information, is you should really seek it out. And so I think that the total is 30 Ethiopian Christian prisoners, but they said only 2 of them have been identified by name. But again, this is a little bit of an older story, so the details are still coming in here, so we don't really know. But based on the message that was sent, it was directly towards the Coptic Church, and so that's also another topic as well, also related. And these things all intertwine, my brothers and sisters. Make the connection with what's happening and what Abba Father is showing I and I, and so, and then of course I play, most of my people, what why are we concerned with Nepal? It's India. Well, yes, but you see, this we can go through here. This 7.8 on a Richter scale. One's the ones. Let me see if I can pull up some information here. The Richter scale. It's coming, from the scientist Charles Richter. It's basically to put a scale on the magnitude of the tremors and earthquakes, and it goes from 1 to 10, and that earthquake in Nepal, 7.8. And the way the way it delineates, it says it happens once per year. Major damage to buildings, structures likely to be destroyed, will cause moderate to heavy damage to sturdy or earthquake-resistant buildings. Damaging in large areas felt in extremely large regions. And that's for a 7.8. If you go 9.0 and greater, which happens 1 per 10 to 50 years, it's near or total destruction, severe damage or collapse to all buildings. Heavy damage and shaking extends to distant locations. Permanent changes in ground topography. And so, again, I just making a link. What's, it's a disastrous place. What have we done in a sense? But then it's not really what I have done. It's what, will be done in his name. And so prophecy is fulfilling right in front of our eyes if one could truly see it. And these are just, there's many other, of course we can stay here because there's many other, themes that go along with what's been happening, and we see it in different ways. And, but it's clear that, something is happening here. It's not just, and we know, you've spoken a lot to, about what's been happening. You see, I mentioned before that the enemy, we know the enemy is subtle. The subtle of all creatures. So these things creep up little by little. I mentioned this, personally, I mentioned this, before in Reasonings, that it started all the way back in, Sandy Hook, which was actually a couple of years, 2 years ago. Or way before that. But I mean, this whole thing about getting with the guns was the target at first, and we had certain things that were going on in Chicago that was raising awareness, and they were like, oh, get the guns off the street, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're leading to a point where these shootings are, keep on escalating and happening statewide. And every state is an uproar. And now we've just reached to Baltimore. Baltimore, these people are raw and they're filled with emotion. Things are bad. The economy is horrible. Nobody's getting jobs. Everybody's in a situation. It doesn't take much to rile up a people when they're so frustrated, and especially when they don't know. They have, it's that lack of knowledge again. And so, we have, the Bloods and Crips, which is a whole other thing. And I have my own theory about that as well. But it is apparent that, there's a link with what's, on the one hand, let me see if I could, but I didn't really mean to do this here, but all right. We know about the as I mentioned before, everything happens subtly. And we know about, we know the vast majority of I people are in these prisons already. A vast majority. A lot of us, there are a lot of us, here, but a lot of us locked up as well. There's a big, vast majority of us. This is actually one of the most striving and popular businesses, which is a whole other thing. I can get into that as well, how that whole thing works and how that cycle works. Because it's all, you see, if you really, if I could really not really unveil, because I don't have any answers. These all, but I mean, it's a cycle of things that happen. And, but I won't even touch the whole industrial complex thing, because that's a whole, I want to, because that'll take you into rap and a whole other thing. And, the music industry, I'm trying to avoid that at this particular moment. But it's very clear, but but the main thing also to keep in mind, I was saying before, is the COINTELPRO is still alive and well. Not everything that they report out there, even though they tug at your emotional strings in a sense. That's the point. That's what this meant to do in a sense. And we don't know. Anyway, I'm saying a lot here to not really elaborate, because I'm trying to avoid. Again, we have a few minutes that we have here, and I don't. I've already. It's very apparent what's happening, brothers and sisters. And so, I made that link with that, and also the Ethiopian headings that we touched on, the slaughter of and then also the earthquake, and this, things are coming up, things are happening. And, we have political issues, we have domestic issues, we have cultural issues, and so hopefully we can get to some, I'm very interested, and hopefully we can get some discussion tonight. And I know we have, limited time, and perhaps we'll have to spill over into an upper room reasoning, perhaps more than likely, actually. But we have about a half an hour left, and willing, another hour after that. So hopefully we can get to ones that are gathered. there's much, and we can unpack and we can go there if we would like to, But again, I give thanks for the brothers and sisters who've been coming forth and staying with us, even to the wee hours in the morning, and supporting us. And every time we come forth, we have blessed brothers and sisters who make the time to be here, and so hopefully we can get to ones, just to even say a word sound, and just to announce ones. We have some brothers and sisters that we haven't heard from in a while. Brother Baruch, who is here, as well as Brother Andrew. We had another Wyndham Luis from Florida. So we have a few of the families growing. I give thanks. So we have a few of our sisters gathered. I give thanks for ones making it out. And there's much. Again, let me. I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to put out the theme. Just get some of these headlines out, and hopefully we can get some discussion, because I think that they're all. I know that they're all linked all together. And it's just interesting to hear from the fellow disciples, and see what, what ones think, or what ones have been revealed in this time. So let's see if we can do that with the time that we have remaining. As we mentioned before, we have in the studio, we have, of course, RasTafari of the Line of Judah Society of His Imperial Majesty has been with us in hosting the show. In the studio with us, you also have I brothers, fellow co-laborers, Brother Ayasin of RasTafari Midrashim on the WordPress.com, as well as Brother Yifti, Johannes Wilde Emmanuel, RasTafari Renaissance.com. I fellow disciples and fellow co-laborers here. And we have a lot to touch on. And of course, we like to spill over again, as mentioned, to get to the rest of the brothers and sisters that are gathered for tonight's discussion. So without further ado, I know, let me just, I kind of taking out the audio there. So I know the Rebbe's here with us. Let's push forward and see if we can bring forth Wyndham Ayasin. If you're there, my Wyndham, brother Ayasin of RasTafari Midrashim. Family greets you. Shalom. Greetings. Say nicely.
Shalom. Yes, I am here, and greetings, shalom, and Shabua Tov. Perfectly good strong to the entire family, all the brothers and sisters, and just a quick meditation in remembrance of our Rastafari patriarch that is often become persona non grata or not very well known within Rastafari. It's just interesting that the name Malaku, also the word Amlak, the word for creator or God in the Amharic, you can see the word Amlak and the Malaku, the suffix. In the Hebrew, I'm not quite sure yet with the Amharic, but it would, if it was a Hebrew, it would be like our angels. So that's just an interesting note right there. And always good to remember him, not only his works that he had accomplished, but also the road that he set forward for I in this tribe. And okay, just about the the Baltimore riots. We had Ferguson just a little while ago, maybe a cycle or a year ago. I'm just thinking about that. It still seems like the lost sheep are looking toward, the government. I mean, that's the whole evil and the whole just wandering around in the civil rights thing, because it really is apparent what civil rights did was take faith away from the people's faith away from, our creator, and really put it in the government. So everyone's looking toward the government and these shepherds, these false shepherds. And I'm not quite sure why the churches aren't, even whatever denomination is not, speaking more about this. It should be evident, because, okay, Baltimore riots, we have them now. 1968, we had Baltimore riots, right? And we had Watts riots in 1965. 1992, I was out in Cali when the South Central riots went down. Okay, and there's nothing's getting better. Oh, and by the way, I do believe we are under martial law, stepping into one of my many excursions into the courthouses. I've seen the flag battle flag, has the yellow fringes with the cordon on it, which actually signals that we are at war. But, we all see that Abba Father Kenamali Haile Selassie wears the cordon. But so we are at war. Yeah, these. I mean, I think at this point right now for I is really just to prepare. Slowly again, like the Rebbe said, to really understand I mean, the way I come from it is really Torah based, but also studying to be able to put it into the right context if I need to. But also, this is something that I've been contemplating on for a while, and I don't want to bring it forward too early, but I think defending our own lives is something that should seriously be considered. Actually I put down firearms for a very long time because I just didn't feel I was disciplined. I think I went through a lot of trauma that I would not have to know how to use it properly. But I think at this point, as we grow, that's something that we should open up a discussion about. Also, the other thing I just really wanted to briefly mention was, I really don't think any of these riots, these protests or anything will really amount to nothing. Of course, that is not to say that, people don't have the right to protest. But at this point, I don't see it really going anywhere. The Bloods and Crips, well, Zawadi, if you'd like to reason a little bit more about that, I actually still communicate with ones and ones. And they lost people too. They really what they need some guidance really. I don't know where they could get it from except for from maybe some of the ones who really know the Bible. But then again, all this COINTELPRO has been enacted on us. So, it's I don't know, but, and when it's all said and finished, the kingdom is here and will prevail. So that's about all I have to say. Good thanks, Shalom.
Amen, amen. Yes, I. Once again.
One quick thing, Bridget. There was a commentary, a Mishnah was really interesting. That's also why I said, especially I don't go out and get foolish and get involved in any of this stuff, because I remember reading a Mishnah, I still can't find it, or I'm not sure if it was a historical thing, but it said during the time of the Exodus, right? It said that, a lot of Israel started rebelling, and there was like a big civil war there in Mitzrayim, and like a lot of the Israelites died just going through that. So I mean, that's just a word of caution. I'm not sure what it means. I haven't found that Mishnah. It's been a while since I found that. So I mean, I read it, but I will.
Oh yes, that's a right word. Because remember, even the Torah says,
my fault.
all did not come out from Moses. They all did not come out with Moses. I think I have to get that exact verse where it speaks about that all did not come out Moses. Many did come out with Moses, but all did not come out with Moses. And this is one of the speculations concerning some of the Aga, or what they call the Beta. Well, we are Beta Israel, but they stick that name on them. The so-called Bashas or the tribe of Dan. Some of those who are on the other side of the water, but still in the territory, still within that Genesis 15:18 land from the river to the river. See, because they have us in a kind of a geopolitical. They have recut the geopolitical map, almost like after the war. They said that what was his name? Churchill took out something like that, and they just divided up, that whole region. And that's part of the reason why a lot of these tribal conflicts happen in the way they do, because how they divided the land. They didn't ask the people, say, okay, which is your ancestral land, and we'll give you, your territory within this, and then the next tribe will give you this. What they did, they split it in such ways so that there would be conflicts amongst, different groups and different peoples, so that they could come in as a savior. The whole problem, the so-called Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, which is not, Hegel's just basically named it. It's just it's a strategy that can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. We unfortunately know it for bad in the sense of the seclorum, problem, reaction, solution. They start the problem, and then they look for the reaction. They wait. They don't do anything, and then they come in with a solution, what they already wanted to do. So what they say, what do we want to do? Okay, we want to do this. So what kind of problem do we need to cause to generate a reaction so the people will say, please, please, please do something, and then we'll roll out the plan that we already had before we started the problem. In other words, so that's kind of how that particular tactic goes right there. So the commentary that you were speaking on concerning the Israelites and avoiding a lot of this, a lot of these things, avoid trouble where you can, like the scripture says, as much as possible, be at peace with all men, as much as is possible. In your statements, there was some very interesting things that you mentioned. A couple of them I was able to just recall right now. One of them is when you was talking about how come the preachers and the pastors, a lot of the preachers and the pastors, well, how come they, how come they don't do anything? Well, I don't know if you've heard about this. They call it the clergy response units, the so-called clergy response units, and it's connected with a misinterpretation of Romans chapter 13, which we probably can, address a little more in detail at another time. You know how I mentioned, and I'm mentioning even more because it's like a principle there that you can apply, like a formula, where we use the same language, or we use the same words. And words may be used, but the language is different. You know what I mean? Like when you speak about freedom, we speak about freedom, and they speak about freedom. It's a very different concept, just like liberty. In fact, freedom and liberty is not really the same, not really the same thing, but the point of it being that Romans chapter 13 has been used. If you read it, it says something to the effect of, let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. So many of the preachers and the pastors who are part of, especially in the black and in the so-called black communities, since I would say since like sometime in the 50s and 60s, they really were able to do it real strong. It's connected with even that woman, that crazy evil woman, what's her name? Mary Songers. And her she was part of the eugenics thing and Planned Parenthood kind of comes out of in some of the documents that have in light of date when they first were being released, how she was, to the Klan, others like, we have this plan, but we don't want, the people, the so-called blacks, they're going to probably find out about this. And when they do find out about this, what are we going to do? Because this plan, once it starts in motion, some of them are going to find out. So they decided that we need to get the preachers, the preachers and the pastors, because they are most, respected within, the black community. And one time that was for good reason. One time it was for good reason that the pastors and the preachers really were the upright ones in the community. And there was a whole different, you could see the fruit of that. But what they did is basically get their own pastors and preachers. And this is where the counterfeit, this prosperity heresy, not that there's anything wrong with prosperity, but it's like a witchcraft what they really be doing. They take a true biblical principle and skew it and then forget all the others. It's almost like taking the THC out of marijuana, or taking the active ingredient. And they usually find that when they do this with such things that are natural, that they really create, it's like cocaine, when you take the cocaine in a natural state, like in the Andes or wherever the native people there take it, they don't get high, they don't, get on, act like kids or whatever else. They can do work. They can do what they need to do, and they live happy lives, and they're unaddicted, so forth and so on. But when you take out the active ingredient, or what you think the active ingredient, the addictive agent is, and all the other things that would have stabilized that, you know what I mean? The other ingredients, like when they talk about genes, they say, well, this gene, we're going to take this gene out, and all the other ones are like junk genes. They're not junk genes, they're junk scientists. They don't have that knowledge of what these other genes don't have the knowledge of those other things. So the same thing went on with this interpretation. So they got certain paid Negro so-called pastors and preachers, especially out of certain movements, and I have to say that one of them was like the Baptist movement, and a lot of them were initially out of the South, but then later on they were able to do South, North, East, and West. The same thing. First they had to do it on the plantation, right? First they did it to the so-called black people. Then they did it to other white people, because when they gave black people birth certificates to keep track of them, wow, began black people getting some of the government that they deserve. So then the white people went and got birth certificates before all the births and all that was recorded in people's Bibles. Then they were still sovereign. They had their records. That's why people always kept the Bibles, because the Bibles record the births and the deaths, and you didn't have to go down to, any kind of bureau or whatever. Once you do that, you become a ward of the state. And, a ward of the state is usually like an orphan child or something like that, like a child that is still considered in its minority. And minority means that you have not come to that age of what they call like bar mitzvah, that age of maturity, that age where you can, where you are a full-grown individual before the law. So
well,
in this... Go.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but interestingly enough, because I know, just to touch on that point, because especially before I was speaking about, the Emancipation Proclamation, this whole thing, with the way the whole war panned out, and also remember with that minority link, that we're still classified as 3/5 of a human being in a sense, and we're not members of. We're not American citizens in that sense. We're citizens of the United States. It's a totally different thing. So the United States as a corporation, in a sense, we're not American citizens, but we're like we're citizens. That's why we the link that I made with making when we sign our names, we put it in capitals. We are members of this corporation of the United States. That's what but we're not American citizens in that sense, which is perhaps the reason why they can just kill us like that. Not kill us, but this exaggerated police brutality, etc., has been happening so rampantly, and they keep on getting acquitted in that sense because we're not.
Well, we're not, and we haven't changed our status individually or in groups. We haven't understood what it is in the law and where it is that we have signed on to an adhesive contract. In other words, when the child gets a certificate and everything, that's actually where it begins to become a commodity.
From the very beginning. Yep.
When you're carrying these European names, when so-called black peoples or so-called African or whatever the particular continental or nationality ones might feel as their culture or whatnot, but when you are carrying these European names before the law, that is considered fraud. That's considered actually a fraud before the law. And this is one of the reasons why they were able to tear up those ballots back in 2000 or 1999, 2000 and everything, and get away with it. Of course, they had to shuck and jive the politicians and everything, but basically they were able to get away with it because, legally speaking, they were in the right, because many of these people that Margaret Sangers, like the pastors and the priests, they would be a part of the clergy response unit, to use the clergy and the fear of the false gods, you know, the false Jesus and the false God and whatever, you know, Lord and all that kind of stuff that they talk about, they would use that. So they have preachers and pastors who basically are on the payroll. In other words, it doesn't mean they know the whole plan. Of course they don't know the whole plan. But they know the part of the plan that they're emotionally locked into, and usually, you know, it is to the most lower nature, selfish levels, you know, usually your life, or we'll give you a little money, or whatever else. So what these ones are doing, and you might really hear about this if you go to YouTube and look up Clergy Response and Romans chapter 13, how this chapter where it says, like, let every soul be subject to the higher powers, there's no power but of God, the powers that be are ordained of God. Paul was not talking about that the Romans are right and exact, and the Romans, we should bow down and worship the Romans. He was just making a point which is law, legal, and which is right. But he was not saying that, well, the Romans are the higher power. But a lot of the preachers and the pastors, they preach this to the ignorance, and one figure, well, the higher powers in me is the government. Even though in principle of law, the government is basically like right now, if we're all together and we say, well, we want one to represent us as a group. So we choose Brother Zawadi, Ayerson, so forth and so on, and they speak for us. So when they're going to make a decision, they come to us and say, well, hey, y'all, what do you think about this or that? And we tell them so forth and so on, and they represent us. So that's what government is. It's not government. People think like the government is like God in a sense, and the government is really our servant. It goes back to what enslaver, man stealer George Washington said when he said government is not reason. Even though I don't like him, what he said here is right and exact. Government is not reason, which shows me he probably took it from somebody else. But government is not reason. It is not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant. That's why they have so many checks and balances. Even the teaching of His Majesty when he teaches on, and he's teaching on law. Because if we are to come into reign with him, reign with Christ, and seat on those thrones of rulership even above the 12 tribes of Israel, as the Messiah says, we will have to know law. Not just law in the academic sense, the spiritual sense, of course, written on our heart, but we will have to know what is righteousness. You know, so it says here, whosoever therefore resisteth the power, back to Romans 13, resisteth the ordinance of God. So there's the preachers and pastors that have been sent out there, or who are out there, who are preaching to their congregation that when an emergency comes up, and you're right, my brother Ayerson, that we are in a we're in martial law light. You know how they have like Bud Light? This is martial law light. In other words, you know what I mean? It's, remember the serpent, like the brother said, Zawadi, you said, you know, the most subtle. You see, it's a creeping, like what they call the coup against the King of Kings. And the Lord of Lords, they call it the creeping coup. It's a creeping, they call it incrementalism. The example of it is how can you boil a living frog in water? And they've actually done this. This shows you how crazy it is. But to understand the principle, you put a frog into cold water, and you turn the heat on lightly. And you keep turning it up lightly. After a while, you know, the frog is in the cool water and it's enjoying itself. It gets a little warm. After a while, the frog goes to sleep. You know, almost like when you're in a warm bed or whatever, you know, you begin to catch some Z's and everything. But before you know it, the frog is cooked. So it's incrementalism. It means that sometimes if you do something, if you do it all at once, people will see you and they'll be like, oh, hold up. You know what I mean? You do it little by little, steps by steps. And they do steps and they do counter steps. What they do is like, and this is a good strategy. We can adopt this if we would have the wisdom, but they do is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If I make 2 steps forward, make 1 step, and I really want to make, but then I make some bullshit step back 1 step, but I already got 1 step forward. So it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. So we're in a martial law light. In other words. In fact, what I would like, if anybody know how to put fringes around our Ethiopian flags, we need to get some fringes around our Ethiopian flag, our imperial flag as well. But yes, we are in a state of martial law. That's why they try to say in the Baltimore thing, the black BTX 1000, who's with the National Guard or whatever, she kept saying, I repeat, we're not in martial law. I repeat, we're not in a state of martial law, because if we were, you would know it. She went through all this vainglory kind of stuff. We're not in a full state of martial law. So one of the reasons why is because this verse has been preached out of context. Actually, this verse, if you really read it in its true context, it is how the government, the rulers the people represent the higher power to the government, because it's the people that have given some of their trust, the hands of certain individuals, like from the community, to represent their collective interests, with another group or other groups of people, like in business. We are part of a business and we want to do business with somebody else, but we elect from us the one that probably can represent our interests best, and they basically go to the table and negotiate, in their own style, with their own personality, but with the principles what we, as the group that they represent, want to be represented. But somehow they have flipped this entire kind of matrix on its head. So that's one of the reasons why, like Bob said, now, you feel like bombing a church now that you found out that the pastor is lying. And this is kind of one of the things that is also very much coming to. So a lot of the preachers and the pastors, and you usually know them because they run the MLK thing, and it's not like a lot of them don't even, are like lower level Masons, like 3rd degree Masons. They're not even like 30-something degrees. Albert Pikey said, looking into the 90s, Albert Pikey said that when a Mason comes to, like a Freemason comes to the higher level, like at the 31st or 32nd degree, then we will reveal to them that really it's a Luciferian agenda. We worship the so-called white God and Adonai, who is the black God, and he actually says this, the black God, he is really God. You understand? We'll tell the Masons, if they ever come to this high level, and many of them don't, they stay at the what they call 3rd degree. Like when the police say, "You're giving me the 3rd degree. You want to give me the 3rd degree?" They stay at the 3rd degree of Masonry. So a lot of these ones, they're at the 3rd degree of their understanding. It's called compartmentalism. Have everybody working in their compartment. So, like when they did the bomb, what they call it, the atom bomb. The first one was Trinity, at the center called Trinity. Interesting right there. But when they did the bomb, they had like thousands of people working on it, and many people didn't even know they was working on the bomb. Some people knew a little bit. People knew everyone was working on, like, you'll work on this little part. I'll work on that little part. We're working in different sections. Then they bring it kind of all together right there. But one more point on the so-called firearms. Yes, one has a right, but be wise, my brothers and sisters. Ideally speaking, it's best in the land, if you understand me. To say in the land means outside of the cities, generally speaking. But be wise all the same. But I definitely would advise that. And the way the law is, the way it's set up, of course, as speaking to the brethren on this level, I would say that some of the sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives, the way they set up the system of things, can probably, get the license for it. But you'll both go and you'll both practice and shoot, if you understand. So it's a little bit easier on that level. Remind me of back in the days, like you was talking about, with some of your previous old self. I remember some things too, going to the reggae dances, the clubs. We knew the men were going to get all searched up, so we would put, not we, but ones will put the heat on the woman in a sense. You know what I mean? On that particular level, not the heat on them in a negative way, but on that level. But what I'm saying is that sometimes it's easier for the wife, if you understand me, you know, to get those things, you know. And women are actually much better shots. They're a little calmer. Something it bugged me out when I really found out that was true. Anyway, I yield, my brothers and sisters. I yield.
Shalom.
Oh, shalom.
Shalom. Yes, I give thanks. Mine, I was just mentioning what Dia was saying there, so a little bit of a. Anyway, yes, I give thanks, my brothers and sisters. We're in the last hour, and let's see if we can get to some of our brothers and sisters that are gathered. We'll go forth and bring forth two of our brothers, and then we'll get to some of our sisters. Sister Emmanuel is here, as well as Sister Aide, Sister Rohama as well, Sister Mamanique. There's quite a few of us here, so let's go forth and bring forth from Education is the Key 3 on the YouTube. And our blessed co-laborer and blessed disciple is here, Brother RasTafari. If you're there, my brother, the family greets to you. Shalom. Give thanks. Greetings. Brother RasTafari. All right, so we'll push forward and bring, brother, if one's the ones who have not subscribed, look for the brother on the YouTube, as I mentioned. Education is the Key 3. Many of the Rebbe's videos have been mashed up in revamped in a sense with new audio and stuff like that. And also, the brother has a lot of informative RasTafari related content on the channel as well. So give thanks, Brother RasTafari, for being here with the family. We want to utilize the time that we have, so we're going to push forth and bring forth from the RSC, Rastafari South Committee, Aina Wyndham, the first ambassador of the Rastafari South Committee, Aina Wyndham. Baruchu is here. You can find a brother on the YouTube as well, Baruchu1 on the YouTube, Aina Fellow Disciple. Family greets to you, Brother Baruchu, if you're there. Rastafari Codes. Good thanks.
Yes, Shalom, Rastafari, and I just want to say, man, I miss the eyes. I miss the eyes. I love you eyes, man. I really do. I love the Rebbe. Thank you, Rastafari, for everything, for real.
Baruchu.
You know.
Yes, Baruchu. Shalom, brother. Go ahead, go through, man. Good to hear that voice.
Oh man, it's blessed. I love you guys so much, man. I want to say, if anything that I've been working on. Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. What you say?
No, I was just I was just sharing the same love, the love for the eye, beloved. Go through, my brother.
Give thanks, I appreciate. Yeah, I just, and in Yeshua and get them all out yet. I mean, seeing a good vision of Yeshua more of the time, and just really working on the spirit, getting the spirit just completely 100%. But it really want to leave a word. If I can leave a word that I want to say is it was Psalm 51 I was going over today, and also